The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today on job transitions, voluntary or not, part of the Boost Your Career webinars that are co-sponsored by Sue Mentors and Tulane University. Today, you'll be hearing from me, Sue Griffey, also known as Sue Mentors. We're going to talk today about job transitions, as the title said, and these are both out of a job, but also into a job. We'll be looking at them from two perspectives. One is what are known as voluntary transitions, and the other is involuntary. These usually encompass the kinds of things that are listed on top of each of the images. But I want to point out a couple things. One is getting a promotion is also a voluntary transition and something people don't think a lot about, and we'll be referring to that later when we talk about what transitions mean in terms of going into a job and out of a job. An involuntary transition, there can be career gaps that you don't necessarily lose your job, but it's still an involuntary transition. And so it's important to think about all the ways and understand the differences between the two and how it could affect you either leaving a job or going into a new job. Most importantly, when you're leaving a job, you need to make the appropriate exit. And in all cases, there are company rules that you need to follow along with what makes sense for your situation. The first thing you do when you think about making a transition out of your job is planning. For a person who's got a voluntary transition, this could be 2 weeks or longer in terms of a timeline. And an involuntary transition could be as short as immediately, depending on the type of job environment or reason for the separation. The important thing is that whether your timeline's immediate or there are involuntary transitions where you may have 6 months notice if funding is ending, as much as possible, try to plan for things. So voluntary would mean that you would get organized yourself before you talk to anyone else. You'd write a resignation letter, you develop a separation plan that identifies what you'll be able to do before you leave, how it will be transitioned, milestones for when each of the activities will happen, so that it's clear when you talk to your boss and your team all of the things that need to be done and how people will be able to look after the work that you've been doing. Involuntary may not know about it ahead of time to do any planning, and we'll be talking about situations involving that as we go forward. But here's a personal professional development tip from me. Always keep your contact list and your own personal professional documents up to date and on your own resource area, either a cloud-based situation such as Box.com or Dropbox, and not just on the company intranet. When we then have done the planning, you want to make sure that you notify people, and there is an order to this. You need to notify in the right order. For voluntary, you want to meet in person as much as possible, or at least on the phone or a video conference with your boss. And that meeting includes your separation plan that I just described, but also a rollout of a communications plan about who's going to be talked to when. You give the formal letter to your boss. You also give the letter to HR. And for involuntary, unfortunately, that often happens that the boss will initiate the meeting with you. With HR is often there, depending on the reason for it. They will usually give you a letter, and So you'll see the two letters up here. The one on the left is the one I used when I retired from my position. And the one on the right is a template letter that defines someone who is being terminated immediately. The letter and the HR person will always give you outline what do you do about your badge, access to the office, the date of separation. In both cases, though, no matter what the reason is that's initiating you leaving, you should and are allowed to and expected to have a meeting with HR. Sometimes for people with involuntary transitions, the meeting may come after you've left and had a time to reflect on other things that you need to get answers for, such as any retirement savings plans that need to be handled. In this case, there was something in the letter on the right, there's something referred to for COBRA, so that's the healthcare, but I was unclear whether they were going to, whether there was any retirement savings plan for that. In both cases, their letter should have the separation date and some detail on the plans for going forward to make your smooth exit and smooth for the company to take on the work you've been doing. Next, you're going to start notifying people that you've worked with. Usually it's your key team members, that's the upper left corner. Sometimes it's key colleagues, people who are at your level or above across the organization that you've worked with, maybe in projects. And then to a certain extent, everyone else in the organization. Obviously, it's in most large companies, they don't necessarily put out a big announcement in every weekly newsletter about who's leaving, but some companies do. For involuntary, that's going to be more difficult depending on the timing and the reason for the transition. You need to discuss this with your boss and with HR. As you saw from the termination letter, that was immediate. They had already taken his or her badge and cleaned out he or she had cleaned out his desk. But you may be able to negotiate, yes, I'd like to notify my team leaders. Yes, I'd like to notify this client I've been working with for 10 years. So even if you can't do it, discussing it with your boss will remind the boss, if they haven't already thought about it, about how they're going to let the client know. Oftentimes in involuntary situations, the company prefers to let the client know because they want to be able to tell the client what person or what resources have been made available to fill in the gap for what you were doing for them. One thing I wanted to bring up, and this happens with work if you've been working more than a few years with a client, there may be key clients you want to tell before the news gets out. So after you tell your team members and key colleagues, you may want to, the middle picture shows the key clients. You may want to contact the key clients and tell them personally yourself before you tell others in the organization. The whole point is, don't let news get out before your immediate circle and people that need to know have been informed. And don't forget then to let people that have been helpful to you know what you're doing. It's oftentimes in a voluntary situation, if you're moving really from one job to another immediately, you're usually too busy leaving one job and going and starting the next. You don't even think about this. People in involuntary situations, I advise don't rush to do this till you have some time to adjust to the news, depending on why you're leaving in the involuntary situation. But you first want to contact and let your key support know what's going on. Mentors, networking, people that have helped you get this position, for example. And use phone or personal contacts, such as a direct email with a personalized message, or I wrote the top left letter to someone who had been really helpful when I took on the job and helped me through parts of the difficult times there were occasionally. And then in the bottom right, you can see someone who's letting me know that she's moved on from grad school and she has a new email, which again, very helpful. After that, you can send a group email to your friends and colleagues with your news. And it's always useful to think about how to do this, but it's a way to reach out to let them know what's going on and just remind them that you're still interested in being in touch with them. All of this precedes any getting on social media, which we will go to next. And make sure that you tell family members, friends, whatever, if there's news that you're leaving a job that can't get out until you've actually finished at your job or have given your resignation letter, make sure they don't advertise it. This happened to a graduate that I worked with as I was her alumni mentor. She was all excited to be joining a company where there was another alum there. And her mom put something on Facebook about how excited she was for her daughter to get this job and work with her friend. And it caused a lot of consternation and wasn't helpful. So for voluntary separation, this is great. Don't forget to use this opportunity to amplify your news and remind people of where you are in your career. For involuntary, let things calm down for you. Don't just jump on LinkedIn to start networking frantically, because that's not going to necessarily get you where you need to go. And here's an example. Is it a harmful thing to do? Not really. When I look at it, though, I think to me it's a big turnoff. This was on LinkedIn a week or two ago. It came across my feed. Someone put a status update and said she was back from a well-deserved summer break. I thought that was really self-serving. She didn't even need to say she was back from a break. But she's saying, I'm resuming my job search. I'm sharing my resume here, even though my profile is up to date. And her LinkedIn profile should be pretty complete. So she doesn't need the resume there. And another personal professional development tip from me is don't put your CV up on LinkedIn. It's not useful. Sometimes you forget to change it. It goes out of date quickly. But your profile should include all of relevant information. But this is basically doing something that I warn people about that won't feel really good to those of us who read it. She's saying, do my work, please. And I always tell my mentees, don't make me do your work for you. It makes it really hard because she's saying, oh, I'm sure someone out there is going to be able to read my whole resume and then decide what I'm looking for and help me get a job. Now, maybe she's a really well-known person, and because I got it as a second connection from someone else who thought it was useful to look at. But if you want an example of how to do effective networking, as opposed to this, just look for the webinar that we did on effective networking. There's a lot more ideas there, and I think you'll find people more responsive. On the other hand, here's something that I thought was really positive. This is a colleague of mine who used her post to announce that even though she had just started a new job in a very senior position 3 months ago, she was let go that day. For the reasons she mentioned, they had budget issues, they had to restructure, and she was saying she wasn't blaming them, and she was talking about her field of work undergoing changes. And she said, I choose to see this as an opportunity to seek out my next challenge. That feels a lot more comfortable to me reading that of, oh, how could I help Sarah, than the previous person who said, here it all is, now what do you think? And what she then did was put this out, which was great because it was a way for her to let people like me, who's not in touch with her every day or even every month, year, to know what's going on with her. But also then she continued to do effective networking. She's amplifying and giving value back. Here's something she wrote about an article that was published, and she actually read the article and then made a comment. This article does leave me questioning, et cetera, et cetera. Someone else picked that up and put a comment in. Again, effective networking. This is how you give value back. And so you can see that that's a positive way, and you understand then here's a professional I might like to work with. We're going to move on now to the other side of transitions, and that's going into a job. I haven't yet found another word for onboarding, which came into vogue a decade or so ago about going into a new job. So I've decided to embrace it because I love to travel and get on an airplane, and I've got to go on board when I get on an airplane. So here's me going into onboarding. What I want you first to understand that's not talked about very much from the side of the employee or the career professional, actually, is that anytime you make a transition, this is your role realignment. If you look up the definition of role realignment, it actually refers to a lot of what companies do in realigning, streamlining, re-emphasizing different content areas, whatever they do for this. But role realignment is something that I learned about decades ago when I became a nurse practitioner, moving from nursing to nursing in a direct patient contact in, for example, a hospital or clinic to a more autonomous role. And that definition, the way I would phrase it is, this is the change, mental, in confidence in your skills and experience, that you need to make to function in your new role. So in a voluntary transition situation, this is moving from direct technical work, such as when I was doing direct evaluation work, to being a manager or leader and having oversight of a team. This is moving from one job to another, where you may or may not have a promotion in a job, but you're certainly going to have a new way of doing your job. And also a promotion within your job, because a promotion really is a different job, obviously, and it requires a reintroduction of you in a new role, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. For involuntary, if there's a reason that you've had to leave your job, you start to ask yourself, but need to answer the question, what am I now that I don't have my work identity? Also, as we go on and we talk about what you're going into, you need to remember, and this is in other webinars that I did around why you're not getting answers. For example, no reply, why isn't anybody answering you, or what do you do about experience? Remember that every interaction is two-sided, and you only know what's on your side of the conversation. So you don't know what's been said about you and your job and what you'll be doing before you get there, even in a promotion situation. So when we talk about onboarding, there's a very common view that there's an onboarding checklist, and I was glad to find this last year on Glassdoor, and I went to it partly because I was looking to see, and indeed it's from the company's point of view. In the initial part of you starting a job, there are always policies and procedures for you to follow. Usually you have a company orientation, and then you'll meet with your boss. You work with your boss and maybe discuss goals and expectations, or you should, for sure. And you might have an orientation to your group or division or your work. Almost always this happens in week one. Sometimes it's weeks 1 or 2. I know our company went to an every other week orientation after the first couple of years I was there. So you could start your job and then do the orientation the following Monday if you missed the week it started. But if your boss has not got a full view of the onboarding process, and what I show you here from Glassdoor actually is it's a more complete list. Let's just hope that your boss, he or she, does. because they should be working alongside you. And in case they don't, I'm now going to give you my way in which you should take control of your personal professional development. And that means at this new job, how do you get introduced well? I found these 5 questions from Michael Watkins very interesting. I put the image on the right-hand side of the article, and his order of the questions is different from what I'm showing here. I revised how he listed them to show what I think happens in terms of going into a new job and what are you thinking about and ready to work on. The first 2 in green, those are the kinds of things that are really probably in the front of your brain. Is there a dress code? Do I have to have lunch at the same time every day? What are the social media requirements or restrictions for this company? What kinds of work am I doing, and do I need additional skills? Is there a special time management system we have to clock into that I've never done before? The middle one, so those are short-term professional views. Your middle-term professional view is you begin to think about, okay, who else is here? Who on my team? Who across the company? Who am I going to be working with in the role that I'm in? And your middle to long-term professional goals, questions are those created to value, and then how do you demonstrate that the value you're bringing is resulting in products? So here's your onboarding. You've seen these same 3 images already in terms of who you tell when you leave a job. This is how you're going to be thinking about it when you go into a job. So even if you're in a promotion, you want to think about what this is going to mean. Also, the reason you want to have control or be working alongside your boss on your onboarding checklist is that you want to make sure regular things are set up on your calendars, meetings, check-ins, reasons to track your progress, all of which is your professional development in your job and then for your goals beyond your job. Just an advertisement for an upcoming webinar is we're going to be doing one on managing up why you need to do your boss's job. And today we'll be talking about the things that reflect that. How do you do that work to make sure that you and your boss can keep working together towards the company goals? So weeks 1 and 2, we talked about the orientation, officially meeting with your boss, usually focused on learning about the organization, the culture, policies, and procedures. This is when you have meetings with either your entire group or maybe first the key people in your group. If your group is large, you may have a team that you work with within that group. Other people across the organization, sometimes more senior people, depending on what you are what level you're coming into, but opportunities to get to know groups that will help you in your professional work. After that, you start working away, but not everything is done yet. So in this case, I started the person the day after Labor Day. At the end of your first week or after 4 or 5 days, put a meeting on the calendar with your boss, 15 minutes, whatever. Hopefully your boss has asked for this. You need to come there with not only the goals that he or she met with you on the first day and discussed, but also what are your personal professional goals? You want to show him you're already thinking, how can you contribute? What would you need to do? Maybe you want to go to talk about in a few months going to an annual conference in your technical area and how that will support the work of the company. Again, framing it in the value you bring to the company by being involved. Then from week 1 to 4, I recommend that every week you have a 15 to 30-minute meeting, and if you can get it as a standing meeting on the calendar, even better. And you'll see the 3 questions there. The reason for having those questions is to make sure that you get a chance to ask questions and that you're not just, it's not just dropping into his office to say, Do you think I should call the client about this? Which is something you don't want a person to wait till the end of the week to ask you. But bigger questions about, I don't understand how I'm supposed to do X when I'm going to already be involved in Y. And certainly any issues that arise as you're getting into work and working with the client that you'll be doing work for, whether it's an internal or external client. Your boss is a good place to learn more and more about the characteristics of each client group and how we do the product work we do with them. And then over the year, here's what you're going to be doing. Week 4, after you've been on the job about a month, you want a formal check-in meeting with your boss. So it's not just asking and answering those questions, but you can even ask your boss, how do you think I'm doing so far? What do you think that I should start to work on more? And try to begin to get some feedback. Once again, if your boss didn't outline this as part of what he or she does in an onboarding situation, this is what you want to ask for. And at your check-in meeting, your first month check-in meeting with your boss, this is what I suggest. You tell your boss you'd like to continue to meet monthly and 30 minutes to discuss progress and also be able to review corporate goals, what you're contributing to and how your progress is, but also your personal professional goals. And it gives you set time that's already agreed to. And your boss can now say, oh, okay, I see where she's going. I see where she wants to go. That's great. Let her, put it on the calendar. Month 6 should be a formal 6-month review, because any supervisor should know that if you don't check in at 6 months, especially when someone's just joined, and you get to the annual performance review and there's a real issue, someone more senior than you is going to ask you, did you just notice this now, or why didn't you notice it 6 months ago? It's really important that you and your boss have a chance to talk together in a meeting that's dedicated towards that and not dedicated towards how's your work going and are you meeting your time deadlines. After 6 months review will come your annual review at 12 months, but don't wait for that. You should have quarterly progress meetings at every quarter, a quarterly progress meeting. 30 minutes is great for the life of the time you're at the organization. And this should be the time, as I used to tell people that I supervise, this is your time to meet with me. Tell me how you're doing. Tell me how I can help you meet your personal professional goals. One time, one senior person I had said, look, so I'd like to get in more on budgeting in business development, not just write about our technical area in the technical proposal. That was great. I had no idea she wanted to learn about detailed budgeting for a 5-year project. So that is her time to ask me, how can I do this? Or to tell me, I really need to spend more time doing this. This makes you approachable, gives the employee the feeling that you're invested in them, because you are, because if they don't do well, you're not going to be able to do well. And they will appreciate knowing that there's a regular time set up. So in summary, make sure everything is orderly when you exit from your job. Don't forget to use the opportunity to network with your friends and colleagues, but try to make some use of personal emails and phone calls. People appreciate getting news first when they're important to you. And don't forget that this opportunity is like many things that you will hear about in our webinars, how you continue to implement and take care of your own personal professional development to control your own career path. Thanks as always for listening and attending this webinar. Don't forget to check our channel for all the other Boost Your Career webinars, as well as many other professional development webinars from the Tulane Alumni Career Services Center. Please contact me, Sue, or Sarah for more information on this topic or even ideas about another webinar you'd like to hear about.